Hi guys, welcome back to the Big Sew Along. I'm Ginny, and as always, I thank you very much for choosing to spend some time with me. Today we are doing part 2 of our 2-part series on raw edges for woven fabrics. Thank you everybody for your comments and questions from last week. One of you, Mary, commented she wanted to know what kind of pinking shears I use. So, for those of you who don't use pinking shears often, or don't have pinking shears, or remember only the pinking shears that I grew up with from like the 1970s that weighed 100 pounds and were really stiff, I have a pair of those. I never ever use them. What I do use is these. They are by Kai. These are super lightweight. I mean, they're heavier than their regular shears, but they're really, really lightweight. I've had these for about 10 years. I've never had them sharpened, although you can have them sharpened. Yeah, I've had these for 10 years, and you can see, I mean, they're still stiffer than regular scissors, but this is like zero strain on my hand compared to the old heavy ones. So if you've ever considered getting a pair of pinking shears, I highly recommend these. I don't use pinking shears a lot, but there are certain cases where I feel like pinking shears are sort of a lifesaver. The first one is in sheer fabrics, like sheer crisp fabrics, like organza, organdy. Oftentimes I'll use pinking shears on a lawn or a voile if it's sheer-ish, or if I feel like my serger thread might show through. Anything where I feel like the serger thread is going to show through to the outside, I will use my pinking shears. With the exception of chiffon, I do not use pinking shears on chiffon. If I'm going to use chiffon, I almost always just use a French seam because I don't like the serger thread to show through. But for some reason, pinking shears on that really diaphanous sort of chiffon, inevitably you'll get one thread that didn't get cut, and when you pull your scissors away, you'll get like one pull all the way through your fabric. So I don't use them for chiffon. But the other places I use them are, I will sometimes use it on a garment if I don't have a serger thread that can reasonably work, and I'm afraid like you'll be able to see like at the hem or something. I will sometimes use pinking shears there. The other time I use pinking shears most often is for pockets, specifically inseam pockets. I like my pockets to be serged together as opposed to serging the two pieces and then sewing them together. But it's sometimes, depending on the actual pattern, I guess, sometimes getting around the bottom of the pocket where it attaches to the garment is really tricky, and that always, I can do it, but it always just looks messy to me. So I'd rather just serge the straight seams and use my pinking shears on the pockets. I guess that's maybe less professional. However, nobody ever sees my pockets except for me, and it always works. So it's just a lot easier for me. I do not use pinking shears, however, on really heavy fabrics. Yeah, it's just too hard to cut with them, to cut through a heavy fabric for the most part. The other time I use pinking shears is for things like today, doing a decorative sort of thing. So I have 3 different methods for sewing in these, for making these raw edges, and I am wearing my studio tunic today. I'm wearing it with something sleeveless because it's like 900 degrees and humid out there. I don't know where you guys are, but here in Southeast Michigan, it's like a swamp outside. Anyways, so today I'm going to show you 3 different methods for making the raw edges on this studio tunic, and then we'll come back and talk some more. Okay, so we're going to start with our pocket, and this pocket is this is a pocket pattern piece. This pocket has a grown-on facing, so it just gets folded over like that. I really want this edge to be raw. I could cut this because it is on a diagonal, but I don't think that that's enough bias to keep it from fraying too much or unevenly. So what I did was I traced my pattern out and I traced it into two pieces, a facing piece and a pocket piece, and I just added a seam allowance to this edge of both pieces. So now I have something that looks like this. And I've already gone ahead and serged the edge of my pocket, and I put interfacing on the back side of my facing piece. It does not match because I had to recut my pockets, and those are scraps. It doesn't matter because you're not going to see that. Just really quickly, you can see here, this is my bias strip. It's 1 inch wide. And hopefully you'll be able to see here, I cut one edge straight and one edge with my pinking shears. I do it that way just because when I cut in strips, I can cut once with my pinking shears, once with my straight edge, once with my pinking shears. Just so I don't have to use my pinking shears that much. This side is going to be the enclosed side, so that won't be seen anyways. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. This is the right side of my pocket. I am going to lay this down, lay my bias tape down right along this edge. The seam allowances on this, by the way, are 5/8 of an inch. So I'm going to line that up as best I can with that top edge of my pocket. And then, because bias stretches, and I don't want it to get too narrow because then you won't see it, I'm just going to double check before I pin this down that I actually have 1 inch. See, it looks a little narrow there. Okay. All right, once I'm satisfied with that, the way that's laid out, I'm going to take my facing piece and I'm just going to put it right on top. Again, I'm going to match my edges. And I'm going to go ahead and sew those together through all thicknesses with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, and this is what it looks like when you've got that finished. I've already pressed this, so there's my facing. I need to go ahead and trim my seam allowances down, but I am not going to understitch this because once I get the rest of my pocket put together, I'm going to top stitch or edge stitch right along the seam. So now, as far as the pocket goes, I can clip these off, extra edges of my bias tape. And I can just go ahead, I can go back to my directions and finish sewing this pocket just as per directions. Okay, so this is my pocket with my facing sewn to the wrong side. And you're supposed to then fold it out this way, right? And you can see that I messed up because my bias tape is obviously caught in the side seams, which means that I needed to cut my bias tape 5/8 of an inch shorter so it doesn't get caught in the seam allowances, which is what I've done on this one. Now I'm going to finish this pocket and I will rework this one and then we'll come back. Okay, so here are my pockets finished and ready to be applied. As usual, I've made things more difficult for myself by putting that bias tape in there. It looks fine. I'm not crazy about the corners, especially like here and here. Hopefully you won't notice too much once I get it on my tunic. My original idea was to just fold that facing to the back, put an extra line of stitching here, and then trim it off with pinking shears. And in retrospect, I feel like that's probably what I should have done. Now that that's finished, let's move on. This tunic has a back yoke. I have already put my little pleat in the back, which I've already put in. And my bias tape, I'm going to do the exact same thing. And I don't have to worry about it getting caught in the side seams because those are going to be cut off. So, just make sure that that looks right. And again, I'm just going to double check that my bias really is measuring about 1 inch all the way across, and it looks pretty good. Now this It's just going to get put down like this. Right on top like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and sew that down. I'm going to press the seam towards the yoke so that the fringed edge points downward. So I'm going to go ahead and sew that on and press it, and then I'll come back. Okay, so that is my back yoke finished with my bias underneath there. And I pressed this seam up towards the top so that this fringe edge would face down. And hopefully you'll be able to see I put a little row of edge stitching right along here just to be sure that that fringe stays facing down. I did a pretty good job matching my fabric vertically, not so much horizontally, but it is what it is. Okay, so then the other thing I did was I did the exact same method to sew in my side seams, and hopefully you'll be able to see here that my bias is there. Now, usually you would press this side seam towards the back. Again, I want my fringe to face towards the back, so I pressed my seam towards the front. Now, I have not edge stitched this one down yet, but I'm going to do that. And then I'll go ahead and put my pockets on, and we'll come back and work on the facings. Alright, so my side seams are stitched down. Let's see if you can see this. My pockets are on, and my side seams are stitched down with the top stitching so that this seam allowance won't keep flipping around on the inside, especially because I have it pressed forward instead of back. Anyways, okay, so the next thing we need to do is our facings, and let's start with the neck facing. So my original idea, which is always what I should stick with, but I'm not going to. My original idea was to do the same thing I did with the seams and just put a strip of bias around the neck and around the arms, put my facings on, stitch it all together, and flip it to the back. My reason for using the bias strips, though, is because the bias tends to fray better, in my opinion. And the neckline and the armholes already have a fair amount of bias in them. These are a little long, so they're going to have some straightaways. But anyways, I'm going to try it this way and just see what happens. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I am going to put these together, wrong sides together. So I'm just going to stick it in here like this. So both raw edges will be showing. So what I'm going to do is stitch it in there like this, wrong sides together. And what I'm planning on doing, then I'll also have to stitch this lower edge down. Then what I'm planning on doing is coming back and trimming off the outside edge with my pinking shears all the way around. So the seam allowance on this is 5/8 of an inch, which means that my actual neckline should be like right here. I want to try to keep that as my real neckline. So if I sew it here and I trim this down, it's going to be, my neckline is going to be higher and narrower. So I'm going to sew my facings together, wrong sides together, at 3/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to sew this bottom edge down, and then we'll come back for the neck edge trimming. Okay, so our facings are in. And once again, I made another mistake on this one. Because I didn't know how I was going to finish this, I had already put interfacing on my facings. I'm going to trim these down now, and hopefully we just won't see that very much. But I'm hoping you'll be able to see this stitching line here. It's right here. And that is about, it really is right at 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to trim off, I'm just going to use my pinking shears and cut around this edge. And I am going to put this cardboard under here. Let's start with the neck because I think that'll be easier for you guys to see. This is just how I use my pinking shears. Not that it matters, I just feel like it looks a little more even and clean this way. So I'm just going to cut in and kind of establish how far I want to go. And I'm going to cut straight down like this. And then when I go to make my next cut, I'm going to try to line up, this last point with one of the points of my scissors so my notches are continuous and there's no raggedy edges there. And I am just going to keep doing this all the way around. Okay. Now that is finished. We shall see how it turns out after it gets laundered. I'm going to go ahead and do my armholes next. And then the last thing we have to do is the hem. Now so far we've done two different kinds of raw edges. We've done this one with the bias tape. We've done this one with a facing sewn onto the back and clipped off. And I don't know, you guys. I'm hoping that white interfacing doesn't show too much. We'll see. The third option we're going to try is what I'm going to do with the hem. And this is what I was saying back at the beginning I was originally going to do at the pockets and probably should have done. So I have gone ahead and hemmed this just like a regular hem. I think I gave it a 2-inch hem on this. I have my original stitching line right here. That's the line from my hem stitching. And then I also sewed another row of stitching right here, 5/8 of an inch away from the bottom. And now I'm going to just trim this off close to, but not into, this second seam, the second row of stitching. I'm going to do it just exactly the way I did the neckline. Alright, so that's the hem done. And actually that's pretty much our whole tunic done. All I have to do is do the pinking on my armholes and throw this into the wash. So before we put it in the wash, let's get a good look at what these look like. This is the hem looks like. That's what the pockets, the side seams, and the neck. All right, I'm going to go ahead and finish that pinking, and we'll come back when it's all washed. Okay, so here's our tunic after one wash. The pockets, hopefully you'll be able to see this. The fraying on the pockets looks pretty good, and you can't really see where my edges didn't come all, my fringe didn't come all the way to the end, so that's okay. So this is the seam with a bias set inset, the bias piece inset, and so is this on the side here. I'm pretty happy with that. Around the neck and the arms, I think the fraying looks pretty good. Where it's closer to the straight grain here on some points, I'm getting a lot of stringiness, which can just come off. I mean, that's fine. You can't really see the interfacing on the neckline, but you can see it a little bit more on the armholes. I think that's just because I didn't cut that down as much. And then our last kind of frayed edge is the hem, and this one has a lot of stray edges, and obviously this is because this one is cut mostly on the straight grain, and I did not use a bias piece in there. I think for the most part we can just trim these off, and I imagine we'll get some more of these, but hopefully not too much more. I mean, usually when you cut off a pair of jeans or something, the same thing will happen, but it doesn't usually continue to happen. Denim is a twill weave, so it definitely has a tighter structure than this straight weave linen. So we shall see after a couple more washes. But all in all, I'm pretty happy with that. All right, so I hope you guys found that helpful. I did rewash my swatches from last week, and they all came out pretty much the same as they did the first time. So there was very little change in the first wash to the second wash on those raw edges, just for, you know, for future reference. Let's talk about the studio tunic. So I cut this in a straight size 12. And also, I think I said this last week, but I want to say it again. Karen very kindly gifted me this pattern more than a year ago. I'm so thankful that she did, because I love this. So thank you, Karen. I love this tunic. I'm definitely going to make it again. I cut a straight size 12. I think the only thing I did was, I think I shortened it by just an inch. I didn't even shorten it very much. The fabric I used here is my 100% linen that I got from fabricstore.com sometime during the pandemic, I believe. And you guys may remember I was talking about doing the Ray dress from Tessuti Fabrics in this fabric a couple of weeks ago. And I thought that that would be like the perfect pattern for it. And Charlotte commented that she thought it sounded like a nightmare. And I thought, oh gosh, I wonder why. Maybe I didn't pay enough attention to that pattern. So I went back and looked, and indeed it has like multiple panels. I was like, oh no, no, no. I'm not matching plaids on multiple panels. I can barely do it on a front and a back. So, yeah, so I decided to use it for something much more simple, which is this. I'll find something else for the Ray dress. All right, you guys. Yeah, I love this tunic. I highly encourage you to make one for yourself. It's a pretty fun garment just to throw over anything. I can also see this in the fall and winter over something with long sleeves. I think it would be really cute. All right, guys, I think that is it for me this week. Next week, we are going to be talking about McCalls 8452, this skirt that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. I guess in my plans sort of video. I have made this once, and I'm going to make it again. And I have a lot to say about this pattern, so tune in next week for that. Until then, I wish you all happy sewing.